Remember when they gave me a Viking funeral and burnt my body on the river? Before we get into this proper, I do have to make a few amendments to my previous review because when doing some research for this review, I did find out some things to refute my points. But before that, fuck this game. Hate fuck this game as hard as you possibly can. If you take anything from this review, it would be fuck this game because fuck this game. So it turns out that the old woman April meets wasn't an older version of herself, but an extremely older version of Sage, who is a character we know nothing about and is just introduced in this game at the same time of April's death. This means that all of my jokes about the time paradox being created when April dies is incorrect because she never talks to herself when she's older. But for this one error, I have found several, and I do mean several problems that have been introduced because of this. Quite a bit of it revolves around the retarded ending. So why did I make this mistake? First off, she had Crow with her, and that led me to believe that since they had been such great friends, I had just assumed that she was April. And trust me, the fact that Crow was with her will be brought up when the time comes, but remember that it was extremely contrived, and it's only there to set up this moment, so technically I was only incorrect about what the time paradox was about, and not that there was one there to begin with. And then she does use a different name than April, but April also uses a different name in the second game, so who knows? And this retarded house looks almost like the Journeyman's Inn, so I was just jumping to the conclusion that that's where they were. So, my bad. But really, I might as well make the smallest considerations as I'm about to do some very mean shit to this awful, awful sequel, which happens to be one of the best IPs ever created. So then we actually have to come back to why they killed off April. Turns out they wanted to manipulate the audience in as lazy and underhanded way as they possibly could by milking nostalgia and goodwill earned from the first game. Yeah, she does absolutely nothing throughout this game, and even though they shove her into two separate places, all she does is create problems wherever she's around. And Crow isn't dead, or maybe he is dead and the writers are just retarded, but fuck it, we'll dissect that when we get to the ending. So, we are going to do the same thing we did with Dreamfall and go over the general crap before we dredge through this story terrible moment by terrible moment. So we might as well talk about the general crap that bothered me first. First things first, the music for this game is amazing. I've listened to the soundtrack by itself at least 6 times since the game came out, and I find it extremely enjoyable even though they rehash a lot of the same stuff, but that's no skin off my back. I had this whole skit and joke planned for this game, but since I'm still pissed off and I would have been the only one to find it funny, I just didn't do it. This game has a lot of the creative spark that the first game had. It's just not nearly as good, but at least it feels like the game should have been in the Longest Journey series, unlike Dreamfall, which was pretty bland and basic. The most notable difference between the second and third game is that they removed the combat, and I was neutral on that, but a lot of people didn't like it, so I understood. But what they replaced it with was not a better option. Choices. Choices are the hot topic of modern point-and-click adventure games, and it's the plague that ruins everything. The only time that giving a player a choice is a good thing is when it gives that player agency. Now, if you have a brain in your head, that should have been the most retarded thing you've ever heard coming out of my mouth, but you will find that nearly every single game that gives the player choice almost never deviates from a linear path. It's the most mind-boggling notion to give a player a choice between saving one person or the other, and then having the other person you save dying somewhere down the line. I get why this happens. Giving a player a choice creates at the very least delusions of agency, and creating forking paths and narratives is extremely expensive, but at the end of the day, the story never changes, and the choice is not the players to make, and that upsets me. I'm under the camp that if you're not going to give me a choice, which is perfectly fine by the way, then the least you could do is not pretend you're giving me a choice. Most of this is on a more metaphysical level though, so I don't understand why people would just ignore it, but normally the choice at least makes sense. In Dreamfall chapters, if not every choice, nearly all of the choices are retarded on a fundamental level. Either a rational human would come up with a third and infinitely better option that circumvents the problem entirely, or the choice itself is profoundly stupid. And then these choices affect the narrative in ways that are childish and often superficial to the point where I've rolled my eyes more at the game than I've ever come close to liking it. And throughout this entire video, we'll be covering every choice and why each and every one of them is without merit. And this could easily be in other games, but I find it extremely annoying here, so this is where I'm going to talk about it. Every time the narrative changes because of a choice you may or may not have made, this symbol appears in the corner of the screen and it's telling you, hey, fuckwad, here's the shit that you changed. This is extremely condescending as even a stupid monkey understands fire is hot and they know full well what the consequences of touching it will be. Yes, my tiny human mind can't possibly fathom what the consequences will be for when I don't tell everyone that Nana got everyone killed because she's a selfish asshole. And probably the most condescending part of these choices are the recaps about what the important choices were and whether or not they will affect the story in the future. Now, if the choices were done right, this wouldn't even matter because it might even help you grasp the perspective the developers are intending to present. And I'd even be fine with these if it wasn't for Book 4 and 5 having recaps at the beginning and at the end. This is the developer telling everyone, see, your choices matter, and now that it's getting closer to the end of the game, these choices are really going to matter. Guess what? They do not. Oh, they do not. Point number 2 on the generic list. Welcome back to DUD. Now, if you haven't watched my review for the second game, then this is going to be new for you, but for those that have, this will be a slow recap. So in the first game, April starts off determined as she just ran away from an abusive home in order to go to an art school. Then becomes unsure of herself because of the whole Earth splitting into two because of the 4 dragons thing, and then accepts her role as Mother of Time and again becomes determined. That's why it's called the DUD. Determined, unsure, determined. But Josh, isn't that in a lot of things like books and movies? It sure seems pretty standard to me. How dare you take my thunder away from me? Actually, it's way more specific than that, and this is just an easier way to convey that these character arcs are repeated ad nauseum. So in the second game, April goes through the exact same arc, but this time it was anything but enjoyable. Zoe goes through the same arc, but it just starts in the middle and stays there for a while. And Keon's arc is the same, it just happens to only take place over 6 minutes of the game, so it's a little underdeveloped. Well, chapter rolls around, and guess what? It's completely different. Nope. Third verse, same as the second. This time, Zoe starts off defiant with her stopping the bad people in the last game, but after waking herself up, she's back to the sad, miserable Zoe we know and tolerate. And she stays like this and doesn't remember any of the previous video game until the 4th book, and boy was that wonderful. And Keon goes through the DUD as well, but I'm completely forgiving of that for this game because he didn't get anything in the last game, so hell. At least he is getting some backstory this time, so might as well enjoy what we get. Generic point number 3 comes in 2 parts, as the first is a petty gripe, and so is the last point, but it's a little bit more on topic. With games where there's relatively no gameplay, or at the very least, gameplay in an untraditional sense, you tend to do a lot of walking around, and this is neither a good or bad thing. Didn't bother me in The Longest Journey, didn't bother me in Dreamfall. But in chapters, this default walking speed is slow, and it's rather annoying. Now maybe I'm stupid, and in my rage I didn't even check, but I'm going to guess that the running option does not toggle, which means that you're holding down the button the entire time you're playing a game just to move at a still slow speed. Each and every game with this in it is extremely annoying and stupid, because if I wanted to hold down left trigger or shift for 20 hours, I could just do that. There's no need to spend money on that. What bothers me most about this is that you have to set the default movement speed in the engine. And those change drastically depending on a lot of factors, so instead of keeping it at a slow walk and slow jog speed, just set it to the slow jog. Now there are some instances where you'd want to have 2 different movement speeds, like in Dark Souls, but a game that is this story-driven, where you basically never need to walk, and the few times you do, all you could have to do is push a button and it'd slow you down, it's unneeded. And in those games, they make the slower speed moderate enough so you're not forced into running the whole time. Save yourself some animation time and only do the 1 cycle. But that is a minor gripe, and if it really bothered me, it wouldn't be too hard to change it. But what is a problem is why I even noticed it. So most of the game takes place in 2 settings, and they are large in a sense that it does take a decent amount of time to walk around them, and they feel like real places. It takes some time, but over a book you can get situated enough to the point where you learn everything about the city and its shortcuts like you would if you actually lived in these places. But then for some reason, every single book they decide to throw up literal roadblocks in the way, making the honeymoon period of exploring these places pointless because you have to learn new convoluted paths to get to the same places we've been to before. Now you could argue that artistic merit would be more important, but it's not. For what little effect is being presented, it is definitely not worth it. Generic point number 4 is, why alter the already established continuity? So in case anyone really wants to say my points are not valid because these games are not direct sequels, the 5th book just told you to go fuck yourself, because not only does it heavily work off the first 2 games, the last scene in this game is literally a scene from the first game just told from a different perspective, so that argument holds no water anymore. I'm guessing this was to cause the stupid people that like this game to say, everything's tied together, when the only thing I'm thinking about is how the fuck is Kroll still alive after getting his bitch-ass neck snapped in half? But that is a discussion for 40 minutes from now. But this does establish a shared universe between the games. So a quick reminder. The reason Earth was split into 2 was because 4 aliens traveling from another galaxy after they discovered the ultimate power to control the entire universe and destroyed their planet with it, and in order to prevent humans from doing the same thing, they forced the whole situation we now have on Earth. Then the second game adds dreams to the mix, but other than the fact that the Guardian has no control over it, that does work because really it's just an energy source and it does fit the flavor text of the first game. It's weird, but understandably so. Then the third game takes this concept and just pushes it off a cliff. So this game states outright that the entire universe is created because this kid is dreaming and once he wakes up, all of reality will be destroyed. Not all that great on its own, but it's workable. This does two problematic things, and the first, it makes humanity super special. We not only have the power to genetically engineer humans capable of controlling and absorbing all of the known universe, but we are also special snowflakes. This takes the, oh damn, the universe is a massive and wonderful place, and turns it into, but this shit ain't Earth. All I'm saying is it undermines the scope and the tone of the first game. The second point is that it undermines the scope and tone of the first game. This makes the first game rather stupid because the balance is almost meaningless compared to Lux or whoever that boy girl was. The dragons, with all their wisdom and money and power, were fighting over whether or not to reunite the planet for various reasons, when they could have just gotten this kid who wasn't even that well guarded and rewrote reality that way. And this is just the surface of how stupid this is. There are so many more problems that it would take a very long time to describe them all, and a lot of them are in the ending, so I'm just going to save it for when we get to that point, when I spend 20 minutes talking about the ending alone. So just know for now that the continuity is messed up beyond repair. Generic point number 5 is villain motivation. First game is the dragon being upset with humanity and being stuck on the perceived shitty side of Earth, so he hatches a scheme to revert the balance and use the forbidden magic to gain universal power. You can have a problem with this, but it works just fine in the narrative. Second game is a weird fat blob wanted to control and manipulate the entire world by stealing their dreams. As a concept a bit overplayed, evil corporation is evil, but again works well enough so I don't mind it. And the third game either has no motivation given to us at all, which is the better of the two options, or it's that he wants to go home. So this is extremely retarded on so many levels. First, this illogical bullshit makes no sense and can't even be explained away by saying it was the Undreaming that was doing it, because the game directly states that Westhouse was controlling it at the end, and we're going to ignore how stupid that sentiment is. So he commits genocide and attempts to wipe out all magic just for some click your heels 3 times bullshit. This ignores the fact that the game actively tells us that there are still shifters out there who can open portals between worlds, so getting back is easily within your realm of doing without being an evil dick. But no, let's give him the benefit of the doubt and walk through what would happen if he actually succeeded. So he's not going to rewrite reality like he and Zoe's mother planned to, with no establishment or forethought involved. And even if he did, all he would do is destroy all the magic, which he wouldn't shut the fuck up about, which would do nothing. Destroying all of the magic on Earth would do nothing because the magic that controls the entire fucking universe is the thing that keeps the Earth separate. This is the same as if you said you were going to tear down a tree and you just started ripping a few leaves off or maybe broke a branch off or two. No matter what you think you might have accomplished, that tree is still standing and you've done nothing to alter that. But let's just give that to Westhouse and assume that destroying all of the magic on Earth would undermine the magic that controls the entire fucking universe. Once you did return the two halves, Stark and Arcadia are no longer a thing. Meaning if you fucking universe magic the worlds back together, then you would never be able to go home again because Stark wouldn't fucking exist. Is that not apparent to you? Is that not obvious? You have no clue what would happen if the balance was reversed and the worlds became one, but we have to assume that at least something is going to change and that the two spherical worlds wouldn't fit perfectly together like a couple puzzle pieces. The only positive to this is that this is a band-aid approach to storytelling, so no matter how fucking stupid the ending actually is, it's only 10 minutes of the game, so once you rip that shit off, it'll get better slowly, and then you will forget about it. A massive flaw to the pacing, but at least the stupidest shit isn't long enough to really smell the place up. Last generic point before we move on, because I'm starting to kill myself, and we are already way too far into this review without even having started walking through it yet, we have why this game ultimately doesn't work. So Dreamfall is about 50% of a game. A shitty game, but a game nonetheless. And instead of just moving on to the more interesting story and the longest journey narrative, the war that then results in the world becoming whole again, they decide to finish off the story from the last game. Only the 5th book has things in it that could be even remotely considered finishing up the story, and if we're being generous, we might have a few other moments from the other books, so 20% might be a little high, but I think that's an appropriate bet. Meaning between Dreamfall and chapters, we have about 70% of a game. Yes, the Dreamfall story is still not finished, and if it is finished, it is incomplete at best. We are talking dozens of plot elements that need to be explained, a shit ton of character development still missing for a variety of reasons, the game is abrupt with 80% build-up and 10% payoff, and you feel it. Dreamfall wasn't a whole game, and you can tell it was because they ran out of time or another excuse along that line. Chapters is that way by design, and you feel it every second of the game. And if you actually think about the game while you play it, this becomes self-evident to you. If we're not talking about Zoe waiting to the middle of Book 4 to become the protagonist of the game, we can easily discuss the thousands of Chekhov guns that exist. It's funny how many times I've had a problem with a scene, and then after completing the entire game noticing that my problems with a scene are irrelevant because what is being implied or foreshadowed never shows up later in the game. What this feels like is that they knew that they had to end the game, but had no clue how to get there and just made up things as they went along, because a lot of the things could have been fixed had there been a single cohesive script for the entire game. A simple read-through would have picked up several of these problems. So last point before we start this off properly. I was beginning to think that maybe I had thought that The Longest Journey was better than it really was. Here I was giving it all this praise and then absolutely hating the sequels, so maybe it was also terrible. But as I have learned, second-guessing myself is not the best idea, as I've started to push myself when coming up with my criticisms, and that is a great game. I spent very little time in order to do some fact-checking and gathering footage, and it was like a defibrillator to the chest. This shit was magical.
What's going on out there? More and more people are getting caught in loops. I can't keep up. I thought the dream machines weren't dangerous anymore. I thought we took care of that. If not, then...
Hello, Zoe.
Sorry, yeah. Hi.
So we're going to type a few points here into this one, so it might be a little long. So first, Zoe is a time-powered superhero, and at first you're like, well, this could be interesting, and then after beating the game, you're like, why didn't they use that more? They own the intellectual property, and they put the time powers in it, and they're making it. Why didn't they use it more? 3 times her powers were usable. Not effective or helpful, just usable. And I'm left wondering, why would you spend so much time developing something and not even use it more? And outside of it almost being a big-lipped alligator moment, the power outside of the beginning of the game is basically a Deus Ex Machina, only there to let Zoe save the day. But really, it is neat and interesting the first 2 times it shows up. Even if the excuse for the second time is rather retarded, it's just sad that it's so underutilized. No, the real problem is that Zoe is now yelling at Rise in what is one of the more awkward bits of exposition dumps in the series. Now I get it, and if you didn't have continuity errors, I'd probably be more forgiving, but there should have been a better way to tell everyone this information, like throwing it in that terrible opening title sequence. So Zoe's running her mouth about shit she can't possibly know. The last time I checked, Zoe went straight from, oh no, they tortured the little girl to death, to my mom put me in a coma. So unless there was a massive time jump where she personally gave the data to a journalist, there is no way of her knowing about the fact that the dream machines were fixed, or that any litigation was ever filed. Now I'm sure that someone might bring up the notion that Reza got a hold of it, but that leads to 2 different questions. First is, how did he get this information? Was it journalism that gave it to him? And second, why would he publish this information? As told in this game's 5th book, Reza was kidnapped and brainwashed by Wadi Corp, and with that you'd think that any publication that would hurt Wadi Corp wouldn't be published because of his brainwashing. But that's nothing, because his brainwashing is nothing more than a throwaway explanation. Then Rise then says she needs to go home, and you have to think to yourself, he knows she's in a coma, so is he stupid? No, he is referencing the fact that she is not asleep in the strictest definition, so I'm willing to give this a pass. It's just one of those first glance things. No, Zoe's response is rather dumb. Her father visits her all the time, she still has a few friends that she doesn't know that have been killed yet, and she has an entire Taekwondo club. Not to mention the whole living thing that most people really like doing. Yeah, that might be a reason to wake up.
Oh, I feel really weird. The machine's gone haywire. It's pumping a crazy amount of drugs into my body.
So once again, we have 2 problems that are back to back, so might as well cover them together. So after being told by Rise that she needs to shut up and just be the protagonist, she walks over to her bed and wakes herself up. Now this complaint could easily be debunked by the revelation in the 5th book for all I know, and it happened to take far too much time to attempt to grasp this, so I'm just going to present what is happening here with a terribly drawn picture, and when I'm done you can tell me if it's stupid or not. So the end of the second game was a lie because she didn't sit in a hospital in Casablanca, but instead was shipped off to some secret lab somewhere to be tested on, so there she is. So while in a coma in the lab, she somehow manifests a metaphysical version of herself and places herself in the dream world. She is there for a year until Rise tells her that she needs to go home, in which this metaphysical version of herself wakes herself up by giving herself an overdose on some medication that allows her to slip back into her non-existent brain. So instead of waking herself up, she just creates a duplicate version of herself and places that in a place that she wouldn't know about to be picked up by Reza to be whisked off and raped on a nightly basis. Or, she materialized back in Casablanca, where Wadi Corp must have had someone there for the entire year just in case she did wake up, because they couldn't have known when she was going to wake up. who then moves to Europe and after a very long length of time remembers all the things the main body did before she was put into a coma, and once she does, the main body either disassembles and reassembles her in plot-convenient places, or each individual metaphysical body also develops the plot-convenient teleporting. Then the metaphysical body absorbs the entity that creates and maintains the entire universe, and that somehow transfers something to her, not the ability to control reality, but just something, and then that wakes up the main body. So with all of that, you tell me whether it's stupid or not, because I'm scared that it'll kill me, and frankly, it's not even that big of a problem in this game, so I'm more than willing to give it a pass. The second problem is the first choice that you'll have to make. Before this, you have to sit through some retarded dialogue that also ignores the fact that a permanent coma is a permanent coma, and it's some cringe-worthy writing. She then looks right into the face of the other Zoe and gives you a choice. Do you take the path that once was, or the path that might be? Now you have no clue what in the hell any of this means, and you will find it holds no bearing on the narrative at all. If you must know, I am talking out of my ass here because I have not done a second playthrough, and I will not be doing one, and even if I did do one, all I would do is berate Reza. But from all my years of reading and writing, I can tell what has an effect on the story because I already know what happens in the game, and I can evaluate each choice against what happens. But Josh, this does affect the game. No, it doesn't. Ultimately, what this does is choose what part-time job Zoe gets while living in the city and what work friends she has. What this does affect is the filler before we get to Book 4 when the game actually starts, and I will not give anyone the argument that this could even be remotely important. What this does affect is who the nerd from Arcadia talks to in order to learn how to shut down the Dream Machine, but even that isn't remotely important as it just seems like it was done off screen and we just assumed the day was saved. Now I will talk about the choice I made and maybe the other choice is better or more complex, but again, it doesn't matter in the long run, and it doesn't change the fact that the problem still negatively affects the game.
We want Kian Alvane's execution to be hastened.
Alright, this is pretty stupid. So at the end of the last game, the Apostle was captured somewhere a good distance from this place. So instead of sending him home to become tried, they sent him to Markyria to be held in this specific prison. And this is him now being ordered to his execution because one of the 6 instead of all the 6, like the last game said, will be arriving shortly. This is rather confusing because they knew he was going to be trouble in the last game, so why didn't they just kill him when they first captured him? And if they desperately needed him dead, but at the same time couldn't have him killed in front of the men, you could have killed him in secret during the entire year you held him in prison. Poison his food, and then he dies, and none of your men are involved, and you don't have the fact that a riot happened, which is something you will come under fire for even if it had nothing to do with the Apostle.
If you're with the Resistance, why are you helping me escape?
So that you can repay your debt and help free our city.
This is also pretty stupid because we now have to guess how the Resistance knows that the Apostle's in this prison, how to get him out of there, and then once he's out that he will help them. Of course the player knows this, but there's no way the Resistance knows that he was even there, and if we are going to say that Kian being moved to that prison is reasonable, then we have to assume it has been done with the utmost secrecy because the fact that he is alive is a closely guarded secret, and if found out bodes very poorly for the two in charge. And if the Resistance knows he's in there, and for some reason that he will be executed that morning, very convenient by the way, why don't they just tell the 6 about it? Because unless they're really stupid, when fighting an oppressive force with guerrilla tactics, you better know everything about your enemy.
Please kill me.
If I don't kill him now, the guards will. But not before they make him.
Really? This is a choice that will alter the balance. At what point, other than when you're telling his wife that you killed him, which is retarded because a mercy killing is not the same thing as murdering him, could this possibly affect the game? No one brings this up, and this is the last time we hear about this. I forgot about this choice because it was that irrelevant.
You gave me your word, Alvane. Your word. You said I would not let you hunt. You said you would let...
Choice number 3 is just as bad, but only slightly more relevant as it has some meaningly effect on the narrative. So it looks contrived because of the way he forces the warden over to the shaft, ignoring the fact that he could easily be killed by snapping his neck, which he is more than large enough to do. The big problem is, why would you kill him? At no other point can you do something this evil, and no matter how terrible a moral system in this game would be, it would be the only thing that would make this rational. Otherwise, you have a majority of the game character development for Kian conflicting heavily with this moment, which comes out of nowhere and is under no definition well done. I'd prefer to call this useless, but it does give credibility to the idea that the Apostle is alive to a general later on, and even though he would probably still side with you, given the game's writing quality and writing scope, it does have an effect, so I guess it's not the worst.
What part of to be executed in the morning did you not get? And what part of the Resistance needs you did you fail to comprehend?
Well, obviously the core concept.
Now run me through that sword so that you can get out of here and start paying your debts.
His eyes speak the truth. He has embraced.
Choice number 4 is extremely pointless. It should have been the same as a different dialogue option because that is literally the extent of its effect on the game. Either way, the dude is stabbed to death, and either way people talk about it. Pointless with a capital P.
You remember nothing of what happened before the coma. You're not sure you want to remember. But I think you do.
Oh, this is wonderful. Not only is this the start of 20 hours of will she won't she that the game pretends is better than retarded, but it also goes to show just how poorly thought out this game is. She spends most of this game not remembering a thing about her time in the dream world and the previous game she was in, and yet if she doesn't remember the stupid choice that leads to which part-time job she picks, it is high enough in her mind that it subconsciously influences where she works. That's wonderfully convenient, isn't it?
And you still remember nothing of going to Japan? Breaking into Waticorp?
Nope. I exposed a global conspiracy and all they gave me was a lousy coma. Aside from you, Reza, and my dad, no one even knows I was involved.
Why do they know she was involved again? I know they don't explain this, but being a petty dick makes me feel better, so I'm gonna get these in while I can.
Have you spoken with Gabrielle yet?
No, I'm not ready to discuss my dad. We don't talk. He rented out the house, moved to Mumbai.
You don't think you need to talk to him about it?
I wanted to be just like him. That's why I went into pioneering, but I decided to drop my pioneering degree so that I could avoid thinking about him and what he was a part of. So, no, I don't.
Where the fuck is this coming from? Last game she was all like, I love you, daddy, it's cool that we're still friends, and now it's fuck him, what did he ever do for me? Is this part of my choice? Because I chose a new path that was actually the path that we were on the entire second game, that I now misremember why I dropped out of college and for some reason I hate my dad? Fucking hell, she moved to a different continent! You don't have to make up a shitty excuse as to why her dad isn't around. That whole her moving and his working is fucking enough!
Your pick. Nothing...
Exotic. Affirmative. I'll stop by Nella's right now.
And stupid choice number 5 goes to sausage being exotic even though they're in Europe, and only a stone's throw away from Germany. Now I know the reason for this choice is that exotic is from natural meat, but that's also retarded. And the fact that it gave him food poisoning is also retarded because he somehow shuts down an entire meat market without even knowing the information behind the supplier or anything else, and we're supposed to believe that journalism is magic. But that just turns out to be the laziest of all plot devices, so that's just fantastic. No matter what they might argue about later in the game, the fact that the term exotic is hammered into the player in the first book, and we can only focus on that and not the foreshadowing of Reza being bigoted towards organic meat, and that only brings up more questions. But from what I've read, this choice is extremely pointless unless you want to get into a shouting match with that retard, because it turns out her cart gets impounded and the meat shop closes down because of his reporting no matter what you choose, so thank you for wasting our time by making the choice irrelevant. And really, you make the exotic decision between cheese, soup, and sausage, and you want someone with the most basic knowledge of European history to choose cheese soup as the less exotic option, Rangar Tornquist of Norwegian descent? Because cheese soup is the weird thing to me, and I live in the country where that shit is popular. And it's not like you can't get food poisoning from anything no matter how it was produced or prepared or where it comes from, so no matter how you slice it. Ha! This is just problematic.
This shitting shit. He's shitting, I shitting shit bot just shit, sub shit. A shit taken by a shit. Shitting with a giant shit. Shitbot.
Yeah, great character development.
When did I ever say no to a party? I have a +1, if you're interested.
This is getting a little ahead of myself, so I'm going to keep this brief, but no matter what that little stupid circle says, this is not a choice that matters. Choice number 6. Because no matter what you choose there, after you get finished bribing the Chinatown Queen, he is getting beaten up, so there's no way you can go to that party, and it can't possibly affect anything in the game, and if for some reason someone can prove that it does change something, it doesn't change the fact that I am right, and it's beyond pointless. But no condescending circle, no point to be made.
It's about Kaiser Constantine.
Hey, let him go.
And the balance has not been shifted because this is not relevant to anything because outside of our stealing from him, he is not involved in the story anymore. That is pretty weird because it really felt like there was going to be something more important as there was a lot of emphasis on the fact that there would be ramifications for intervening in this polite conversation, but nope. Another plotline lost and forgotten in the months in between when this was first established and the release of any of the other books. But beyond this not affecting anything, there is another problem that didn't wet my whistle. So Mr. Pittsburgh tells us a funny joke. Doesn't tell Zoe the joke or someone else in the game, but he indeed tells the player the joke as he is using a language that only we can understand. This would not have been as bad had it been entertaining, but this being the 6th time that I've heard this joke, the only thought in my head was why? Only why?
If you refuse to talk to me, there's nothing I can do. Look, I'm heading out for a bit. Feel free to eat without me.
That's where I leave you, fucking worthless pile of shit. So you might have thought that me calling Reza a rapist was a joke or maybe it was just hyperbole, but nope. He's just a good old-fashioned rapist. Zoe, while in the care of Reza, is suffering from amnesia and is in an extremely vulnerable state, and guess which fucking asshole takes advantage of her and tricks her into a relationship which includes sex. And I'd even get past the fact that he was a fucking rapist, because even if I hate it more than anything, the throwaway line of, oh, he's brainwashed, almost justifies this. It doesn't. Oh, it fucking doesn't. But besides that, he's a manipulative asshole and a little cunt that can't handle him being in perfect control of his partner, which is probably why Zoe dumped his stupid ass in the last game. But all of that is my reaction to the fact that one of the good guys is a fucking rapist, and that never being addressed at all. But there are more problems here than that. So from a writing standpoint, choosing to ignore the rapist is actually the incorrect option, as a significantly worse option when it comes to quality. Everything is fine and dandy, and then because of my intervention, Reza throws a hissy fit like a cunt, and then he storms off. This is aggressively unexpected, and it comes off rather rushed, and I'm certain this is because you're meant to stay in the relationship with Reza. So a few things. First, why give us the option then? Because if it was designed and then planned for one option, and then giving us the chance to ruin it even more so with the other option, doesn't really help anything, and it doesn't affect anything in the narrative outside of a few dialogue options, so why bother? And for the love of God, change whether or not they're together at the end, which you fucking won't. But they better give us the fucking option, because if you come into this game with the knowledge of the second game, then you have to assume that one of at least 3 things is happening. 1, that is not Reza because Reza is dead and that is an imposter. 2, Reza has been brainwashed and has been controlled by Wadi Corp, which is acceptable from the second game standpoint, but not the third's. And 3, Reza was in on it from the very beginning and is a total cunt. Now, the reason the brainwashing doesn't work from Chapter's perspective is Reza isn't a big-name journalist, and the only thing he does that would give him this status is the first report on the Dream Machine, which again, how and why did that happen? From the second game's perspective, it's perfectly fine, because if you're a big corporation and a journalist is getting too nosy, you persuade him to stop. And Reza got in too deep, and he got his ass persuaded. So we have a situation where we have 2 choices, and because of multiple factors, only one really works. And if you choose it, it makes the writing worse than it would have been otherwise, so you can't win for losing on this one. That was a reference for only a few people. Now, I'm not one to say that Lars von Trier is a great director, because I find the sex in his movies gratuitous. I'm no prude, but when I'm watching porn, nothing as hot as a fat, disgusting man whispering in my ear to touch my penis. And though that may haunt your dreams forever, that is basically every sex scene ever. The director telling you to touch your penis. That goes double for the ladies. But he does bring some artistic expression to his films that would be extremely appreciated in these games. Children falling to their deaths being funny to me aside, we might as well talk about Saga right now because she's only in 10 minutes at the end of every book. It's well-paced and not intrusive to the narrative at all. So this guy builds this house that for some reason exists in between time and space, and it's supposed to be this omnipresent thing, but that makes no sense because later in the game we are told that time can fluctuate greatly between in the house and outside of it. And then we learn that both the parents disappear and probably die because of the house, which means they kill themselves because they needed to protect Saga, and the only way they think they can do that was put her in a death trap to everyone but her. Why wasn't this game about Saga? It was implied that she was heavily involved with the events that revert the Earth back to its natural form. I know there's a little left unexplained in the second game because of certain complications, but they don't answer all of those questions in this game either, and it was a complete story enough that I wouldn't have heard if they just moved to Saga being the hero and then moving the plot along to the next event. So who is Saga? I have no clue because it's implied that she is the reincarnation of April, which is completely retarded and makes my jokes about the massive continuity errors about April time traveling kind of work again. We have to assume this because the white dragon in ghost form comes to her and keeps calling her sister daughter, which is something she called April in Dreamfall, and she did refer to April as her daughter in The Longest Journey, so unless she calls everyone daughter rather than just the person who takes over her place as the Mother of Time and the person who saved her child, we have a slight problem. Maybe this will make sense in the next game, but for now I'm just going to pretend that developers are lazy and just didn't want to create someone new and just use the dead white dragon instead. Because either way, she's not April, and in all likelihood, not the Mother of Time. So that will be it for now, because most of the stuff wrong with Saga outside of her being an asshole ties directly into the ending. And look at that timestamp. Yeah, that was book 1. And we have a good chunk just for the ending, so buckle in, this is going to be a long ride.
You freed me, Kiran Alvane. Don't blame yourself for my death. This is what I wanted.
Starting book 2 off strong, aren't we? Yeah, she wanted to die. She didn't want to free the people from the Azadi oppression. She really wanted to be stabbed in front of everyone and then possibly be reincarnated into a bratty teenager while simultaneously still being a ghost and doing absolutely nothing with the story that should have been starring her. Yes, this isn't one of the only 2 lines she has in this game, and no, it didn't piss me off as it is incredibly condescending to me.
We have sacrificed so much to bring you here. This is your chance for a new beginning, Kian. A new life, for the redemption I know you seek.
Let them.
Really? This is a choice? What happens? You die and game over? That would at least be poetic in some fashion, like in Rambo, where if you say no, it just kicks you out of the game. If you say no, in all likelihood, it just forces you to do the same thing, this time with only a different dialogue change every once in a while, because guess what? Kian still needs to stop Westhouse at the end of the game, so unless the game goes on some pretty crazy tangents when you choose retardedly, this is one insultingly stupid and pointless question and choice.
The Banda Banta are no more because of Azadi.
This is one of the stronger cases for they wrote it as they went along, because someone who is supposed to be so informed that she knows nearly everything just like the Shadow Broker, she didn't know that quite a few of her people escaped and fled the Azadi attack. So we have to assume that either this well-respected figure who is known for her information gathering is either too stupid or lazy to get this easily verifiable information, or the writers just make shit up as they go. The one that makes a lot more sense is the one you should go with.
Alvane, you are on your feet again.
The traitor. She betrayed the resistance to save herself.
This is one of my favorite choices of them all. So what you can do is either rat her out and Enno dies, or you can let her go and Enno lives. Or the third and infinitely better option, which is to understand that we are in the middle of a very important conflict and we need all the help we can get. So tell her she will be telling everyone after this shit is over. But whatever, we need them drama somehow.
Utana, it means nothing. The general was due back in the Northlands.
What about the mother?
She's rumored to be next in line for the seat. She wants to be involved.
So this one blindsided me as I was reviewing the footage. Turns out the mother's in on the entire scheme and actively betrays Kian's and Anna's trust in order to help Westhouse do whatever it is that he's trying to do. So maybe they are informed of this after she gets there, but they never bring it up in any of the Game of Thrones meetings they have, which makes sense because this is supposed to be a twist ending. So this is the developers lying to the people playing this game in order to add more suspense, which makes some sense logically, but the problem is that when you play this game again, the lie is revealed and all the goodwill attained is lost and what is left is a feeling of betrayal. Though I do get the feeling that very few people will ever notice this.
Very well. I will endorse your candidate.
Maybe Unity and
Choice number 10, and this one is pointless and almost immediately so. Literally the next thing you should do after this is get the data decrypted, and that starts off this whole thing about her getting the information to someone, and eventually that causes all of the parties to lose out. So outside of this woman who only sees us for about 10 seconds being a little less than happy with us, nothing changes. Nothing happens, and nothing about this matters. At least in the grand scheme of things.
And Uminska's personally involved.
Jesus, Zoe.
Choice number 11 doesn't do anything because no matter what you choose, the data gets into the hands of the Hand of Fate. Ha! And the only thing that changes is whether or not he dies. But either way, he takes off and he's never seen again in this game, so yeah, more pointless.
Zoe, please tell me you're here to reclaim your man. He's driving me up walls.
No, it hasn't affected Sully. That one line doesn't mean shit. And fuck that rapist. Fuck him as hard as we can. And fuck, I think I chose poorly. I was hoping that if I chose to have dinner with Reza that I would be able to berate him some more, but no, that was me presuming that the choice actually mattered, and so far I think I've done a pretty good job showing that it doesn't. Not even for a second.
Because you, Kian, I trust.
This isn't right.
So this one's a little more painful than the rest because it leads into a lot of things. So this is book 2. By the way, this doesn't matter or do anything at all, so it really doesn't affect anything. We then find out Kian is definitely gay in the 5th book, and in the 4th book there's an option that kind of hints at him being gay, but it only directly hints at him with hindsight, so I'm still a little unsure about it. But right now we're about to kiss the shit out of this woman, and the reason is because he's not gay yet. Now, I have no way to verify this, but the feeling up until this point, even a bit into the 4th book, is that Kian has several love interests, and you get to choose between them, kind of like Final Fantasy VII. This is because of just some of the general writing choices and the fact that he does take interest in these girls. I'm guessing that sometime after this part, people were having a brainstorm and they were trying to figure out why wouldn't Kian kiss a girl, and then one jumps up and screams out, "I got it! He's a faggot!" And instead of questioning that retarded line of logic, they chose to not replace it with 1, it's pretty nasty to just go around and sleep with anyone, and 2, she did threaten us, and since we and Kian don't know that she's a childhood friend, her actions come off a bit crazy, so maybe I don't want to put my dick in that. We get it, Josh, but did you have to use the word faggot? Yes. Yes, I did. He's not gay, or at the very least, he wasn't gay before we'd chosen correctly on the "what are you gay, bro?" question. And let's just say he is gay and the writers are just garbage at their job, which they are anyway, so maybe you're right. But what this means is that he's nothing more than a means to pander to the gay community. The only thing that involves him being gay is that he wouldn't kiss a random woman that comes off crazy and an extremely inappropriate outburst that misses the entire point. He should have yelled at Crow for disrespecting one of the most important people that was around, and not the fact that he wouldn't touch ladies because of the cooties they possess. Crow was disrespecting the shit out of April in a manner that he wouldn't do because that's not how he acted in any of the other games up until this point, so telling him to not speak with such a filthy tongue or to have some fucking respect for April would have been a little more apt than screaming at the top of his lungs that he likes dick in his ass. Either have his sexuality do something, anything in the narrative, and write it well, or just fail to mention it because as it stands right now, it's just Chekhov's queer, and it's fucking insulting to everyone. It's insulting to gay people because it doesn't represent them positively in media unless you think this is deep enough for that and calls them stupid because, of course, dumb faggots will buy shit with other faggots in it. It's insulting to the fan base because rather than having writing in it that isn't so lazy it makes you want to kill yourself, we get moments that are so crowbarred in that it feels unnatural to everyone paying attention. So who is this even for? Homophobic people? There are a million reasons why you might not be interested in a woman and still not be gay. Being a monk-like figure based off the Roman Empire and its mythology just might be one of them.
I don't know anything about a raid.
Choice number 13 and 12 go together quite well as they both do nothing, and it doesn't matter just like the rest of them. So what do these choices do? Well, you can choose to torture the guy, and if you do so, it gives more credibility to his information. But then you have to remember, the reason that we're doing this is because we had a tip-off that there was going to be a raid happening that night, so the fact that a third-party source collaborating that information isn't good enough, but if we kick the shit out of that same guy and ripped his fingernails off with a screwdriver, then it should have been perfectly believable. And then if you kill him or keep him alive, this does absolutely nothing other than alter your relationship with Enu and the Avatar, and by that I mean absolutely nothing because, remember, they got rid of all that relationship values just so they can make him gay. And if you make him a spy or not is pointless because in just a little bit the Azadi are going to wipe out the resistance, and then we're going to break the stranglehold of the Azadi have on Makira, which means this does nothing. Oh, but Josh, what about them finding the engineers? Yeah, what about that?
Reza caught the first Vactrax north this morning carrying 3 very expensive and very secure holomems. He'll retrieve our backups and then...
So we might as well talk about this now rather than the ending because this is a mess already. So Wadi releases a false report that ends up pinning the blame on the British dude for all the problems going wrong in the wireless network. Alright, fine. It would have been way better to just not give the data to Reza and just keep quiet about it and then you don't have to lie about anything, but whatever, I get it. But how and why did Wadi Corp let this news get published? Reza is on his way to the backups in Iceland and he has been brainwashed to be a pawn of Wadi Corp. This news story breaks them and it still gets published and we have absolutely no way of this story not getting buried. It will ruin Wadi Corp if it gets found out, and the one person that can get this information is under their control. So tell me how this makes sense and why I shouldn't bring this up more.
Have you ever watched the stars in the sky?
I'm not just a man.
Of course. And you've seen how those stars, using a calculating engine, we can actually track those stars and predict where they're going to be in a year from now, or a century, or where...
Or you could just use calculus. You know that thing that was designed to do that very thing? This is like finding an ice cream scoop and then deciding you're going to make a machine to just scoop the ice cream out for you. Just wait a minute or use a scoop, you lazy bastard. We don't have a clue what this machine actually does, and the most clear and concise explanation we get, other than it controls the dream energy somehow, can be done by mildly intelligent people and calculators. And not the expensive ones, the cheap ones work just fine.
You should have come to me first, Apostle. You should have come to me.
This guy literally knows Keon sat in jail for a year. He knows the rebels got him out. If he asked any questions at all, he would know this. So why is he spouting this BS about you should have came to me when he knows he spent so much time in jail and only frequently was released and was saved by the rebels? He fucking knows this! Why is he pointing a gun at our face? We learn he is some kind of secret bodyguard, and the only reason he's pointing a gun at your face right now is to lie to the player. So of course you have to try to distract him because he's got a gun 3 feet from your face, and if you don't want to get shot, rolling from the couch to the floor is not the best option. So when you choose to distract him, you throw a half-pound piece of plastic at a dude's face that barely moves his glasses, and instead of being the guy from that one animation that steals songs from the Gorillaz, he acts like it was a brick and then he gets shot in the chest. Which, by the way, he could have easily lived from, and why wasn't that asshole wearing a bulletproof vest under that suit? And guess what? It doesn't change a thing no matter what you do unless he steals the thunder from Zoe when she turns into a god, because this is nothing more than a single line of dialogue, and that is it. Thanks for framing it as him being a bad guy this entire time and then making it all pointless and stupid.
Keon! Do not leave without me! Quick, pull me up!
You take my hand. Hold on.
I know that someone is going to argue against this, but this is not a choice we made. Mr. Avatar over here made up his mind completely, and you can't have a game preach to us about how important choice is and then tell us that allowing us to deny his choice is somehow different because he's an NPC. Still, nothing happens though, because either way people die. I'm just going to assume that Commander Shepard doesn't die if Avatar's there, but really, what little does that do for the story? Now, I could be wrong about this because I'm not going to spend too much time fact-checking this, but after watching through my footage completely and then skipping through trying to find this moment, I think it's referring to the time Keon tells Enu that we are not interested in women, which can only mean we're flying the rainbow flag. But there was no choice here, and even though I thought I did make that choice when I played it, cause it is a choice that I would have made, I didn't notice it while watching it and I couldn't find it. So this might be a case that the developers forgot to put the choice in afterwards, which is funny as shit because even though this isn't a choice, we actively make the writers still ignore this completely because his sexuality is never brought up again until this crow scene. I have just blown my own mind, and this goes way beyond my own snarkiness.
Someone's here, and I'm... Get out of my...
Whoa, Nelly!
Remember when we used to kick the shit out of people all the time when we were highly trained martial artists? Yeah, that doesn't matter as Westhouse can block us like it was nothing. Remember when Dark Entity entered him and it took over his body and gave him magical powers? Yeah, apparently that stops you from taking an ass whooping. And once again, this choice is pointless because nothing changes from this. Or the choice that comes right after this. I'm like a broken record, and yet the same problem doesn't stop happening again and again and again.
Do you remember...
Oh, yes, of course, absolutely. The brave young woman who came to my... and helped me put my sauce... How could I possibly forget?
Alright, so this is where we're going to talk about Kallax, because this shit tilted me hard. So it turns out that Kallax is a lead engineer for the engine, and I'm thinking the logic is that since he knows calculus, he was contracted by Westhouse to build the engine. Ignoring the fact that knowing math isn't the same thing as being able to build a giant calculator that works more like an actual engine rather than a computer, we get to why this bothers me so much. They stomped all over the continuity of not only the last game, but this game as well. The only reason I can think of is that either they thought having someone new would be distracting or limiting in some other way, or they were too stupid and lazy to come up with a new guy. So what ends up happening is that Westhouse frees him from his prison, meaning the extremely mild justification for him being the engineer is gone because he no longer teaches himself calculus in order to escape the prison. Which makes him wholly unqualified to do anything with technology because he is a sorcerer. And then we have to ask, why is the head engineer for something that has been in the works for at least 10 years, is peddling magic potions and performing finger puppet shows and selling novels in a lowly courtyard? We know why, it's because it's nostalgia bait, but in what in-universe reason could we possibly have for this? So they ruined the only genuinely good moment in the second game that requires no amendment, screws with several chunks of this game, including the already awful ending, all because they were too lazy to come up with something more appropriate to be the not final boss. What's worse is that he's the one guy that shouldn't be in this role. Out of everyone who has been established in all 3 of the games so far, he is the highest on the list of people that this shouldn't be. And not because he's a wizard, but because of his character arc in the last 2 games. I was a bad guy. Now I'm a good guy, and I'm going to help April out, but I have no fucking clue why because I hate her guts, and I'm an important part of this super evil plan to destroy all magic on both Earths, and yet I'm too stupid to understand that that affects me as well, being a sorcerer.
Whoa, my whole body's tingling. I can change things. I can manipulate this dream. Cool.
Yeah, that's not convenient at all. So this one's a bit confusing as it's extremely self-contradictory. So the Yagua, the one that is now 3 for reasons, I guess, is an entity that existed before the universe was dreamt up by Lux and spans over all eternity. So before time, she possessed the Soul Stone, and this powers her, I guess. Then the Soul Stone is stolen by Lux so that he can create the universe. Lux then starts to lose his powers, and I think it's because she stole it back, and now she has it because over the last 10 years, people stopped fearing her. So we go to her and ask for it back, and after a 20-minute speech about how she doesn't care about all these imaginary people going away, she then gives you the Soul Stone. But this being that exists throughout time, and before Lux dreamt up the world, then puts themselves into the Soul Stone so that it can be absorbed by Lux, and then by Zoe, in order to stabilize the universe. Maybe, I guess, it's not explained at all. So basically, their only reason for not giving the stone is that they will be forgotten and then die because they remain unremembered even though they existed before time, and the people who used to worship her, and in all likelihood, before they even had the stone. And then they ensure that their deepest fears come true, because even though the game doesn't show it here in the ending of this book, they are absorbed by Lux, so what's happening again? I thought this was going to be the worst of it, because if you name every single convoluted backstory and ending you've ever seen, this would beat them wholeheartedly. But then, this game's ending is just a peach.
What? The bird is magic.
Which bird? I wasn't listening. There's a magic bird?
You were a curious thing, feathered one. So little, and yet so great.
Right. Really?
Hey, remember in the first game when we had to summon Crow into the Guardian's realm because he had no magic and just could talk? Yeah, that's a thing. So just like the second game, this game also has a single moment that is great and doesn't need explaining. So these guys can perceive all of time at any given time, kind of like Dr. Manhattan except for less shitty. And this guy is the most capable out of all of his kind to center himself in a single time period, so he was stuck being their emissary, which means that he already sacrificed himself by being away from his family, but he did so with dignity and was instrumental in the saving of the universe. And then we have this scene, where he sits down and rests after getting Zoe to Lux, and starts to tear because after all of his work, and all of his efforts, and all of his sacrifice, all he has left is a small amount of time to think about his daughters that he will never see again, and upon his ever-approaching and inevitable death.
There's only here, only now, nothing more. I am blind. I think I will sit down, rest, sleep, dream of my daughters, long gone, and hope the future will still be there for them all when I fade to dust.
Well, that's except for two different things. Now, this is a really strong emotional moment either way, but without the first game, this comes out of nowhere and makes it sloppy writing. But that is nothing compared to the fact that the ending outright disowns this man and his contributions to both games he's in with this retarded predetermination spiel that the writers think is a good idea to just throw into this game.
So, Mother, how's the Office of Scientific Research going? You just let me know when you need another message delivered.
I just love this point. So Crow is like, "Hi, Hitler! How is burning them Jews alive and starving thousands of people to death?" And then Kian is like, "What?" And then Crow continues and is like, "How is the Fourth Reich coming? Must be pretty hard since you can't use all them Jews for slave labor and target practice." And then she says, "Yeah, I'm Hitler." And Kian is like, "What? That don't make no sense." And then she says she's gonna stab his ass. And then he's like, "What? That don't make no sense at all." So this twist might have been a bit more effective if once she had been found out she just stabbed him, but since we had to sit there as this terrible scene plays out and it took forever for Kian to get stabbed, we are a little more focused on the fact that Kian is retarded and just let someone stab him. If for some reason you had a literal 10-second delay on all of your actions, you would have still easily avoided getting stabbed. And then they kill Crow off, which not only gets rid of the only character worth anything, it also brings up a shit ton of questions that never get answered. But we will leave that for the ending because that's just around the corner because Book 5 is only 2 hours long.
You must have a lot of questions.
So I'm just going to claim this ending starts here because from this point on, it's basically just a solid exposition dump trying to wrap this mess up in as clean way as it possibly can. Which I shouldn't have to tell you that not explaining anything until the very end of the game and then doing a retarded job of it is not the best option. So the very first question we have to ask in all of this is, how does anyone know how the universe is created? Dr. Manhattan knows because of the whole perfect perspective of all time thing, but unless you count the fact that the Undreaming was inside of Westhouse for 10 years, no one should ever know that Lux is creating reality and that dreams can manipulate reality, which comes off retarded because Lux creates reality and not manipulates it. So even if they do know about Lux, without having studied him, how do they create people that can kind of replicate his abilities? And if the Undreaming does know what Lux is, and should be able to find him if he can find the Ocean Dragon, why do they not have Lux under some kind of confinement? Because it really does screw up everything for Westhouse when Zoe gets him uncontested. Then we get more BS about how Arcadia was spawned from Lux and the Dream Energy, which is an absolute load of crap because even if we agree to the retcon of the first game, it still doesn't change the fact that the balance, the Guardian, and everything else about Earth being split into two is still in continuity of this game. So either spend the time necessary writing the game in a way that fits naturally with all three, or just go lazy and ignore everything like you did in the second game. Here is right in the middle between these two, and it's so much worse because for each thing explained, several new questions are asked, and you keep kicking the longest journey in the kidneys, and it's now puking up blood. What a twist! It's not like we didn't see that 2 entire games ago. You know, because the second game showed us Westhouse being corrupted by some grand evil. This is so surprising I've become monotone.
April?
You. I should have guessed you'd be here.
Oh, fuck you. This is some stupid shit, and no matter what stupid-ass garbage they might be saying about her being reborn, it's fucking dumb because here she is, panning like this is a biography written by someone who only knows her from a single photo. She literally does nothing! Says nothing!
What was that whole thing about find her, save her? I didn't save anyone.
You did.
How?
I was trapped. You freed me.
You died?
And was reborn.
Reborn? How? You're not telling.
Duh, I'm a writer and I haven't thought that far ahead. You keep bringing shit up I wouldn't be complaining about if you stopped bringing them fucking up. Either showcase why the bitch died or keep your stupid ass quiet on the matter and choose later if you're going to do something about it. All this does is waste my time, you fucking amateurs. You hack writers.
Come on, Crow. We have a long journey ahead of us.
No, you fucking don't.
We've met before in...
We have. We
do.
I'm just...
What?
No, you didn't. You missed each other once in this game, and maybe once in the second game if you count him getting arrested and her convenient teleporting powers as just missing each other.
Because that's how the story goes, and it's been written, and we...
And who says predeterminism is a bad thing? I do, Josh. I most certainly do. So people can't assume that all video games and all medium for that matter all dabble in predeterminism because they are not gifts from God, and each time you open a book it will be the same words. Even in roguelites and sandbox games, you have the exact same game you're playing each and every time, they just happen to have a bit more variability to them. But in all my years, I've never come across something that forced me to have no suspension of disbelief that a product had a defined ending. Now, something being predictable is a different story, but I'm still part of the camp that I like to pretend that I'm in the story rather than being a cold and cynical observer, defeating the purpose of reading a book. Now, predeterminism does have its place in certain bits of media, but not here, not in this game. So this BS comes out of nowhere and it aggravates the crap out of me. Saying everything has been told already insults the character development and world building of the first game, you know, the good one. Dr. Manhattan can literally see throughout his entire existence, and he presents this idea that his ability to perceive has been halted by the idea that there's a possibility that April will fail. Now again, we know April can't fail because the game is written in a planned story, but in the game itself there is a distinct possibility that she does fail, and then the bad guys win and gain the power to control the universe. That means that this whole "the story is already written" BS shits all over Dr. Manhattan's sacrifice and the very meaning of his existence. He didn't choose to kill himself in order to save the entire universe twice. It was planned from the very beginning. Outside of stripping away the agency of some really cool and important characters, this predeterminism shit is only a shitty justification for the lousy writing choices that have been presented. How did Zoe's mother predict everything that happened in the second game? Predeterminism. Why did Zoe absorb the entity that creates all of reality even though doing so should have destroyed everything? Predeterminism. Why did Keon scream at Crow that he wanted cock in his mouth rather than anything else? Well, child, that's just the will of the gods. Maybe in the next game they'll elaborate a little bit more on this and how and why this all works, but for now the only thing we can do is roll our eyes at this and just call it how we see it. Stupid and lazy. Is that why all of our choices in the game are retarded and have no impact on the story? To reinforce and introduce the concept of predeterminism to the player? Why even have them at that point then? But do know that if these games keep following these patterns, then the next game will be 15% story and 85% filler. So even if we do get another one, it won't explain anything.
Yes, exactly. How did you know? Do you also...
Spheres? I guess you could say that.
Fuck you.
Shoot.
Well, that's super convenient. And now that the Undreaming and Lux have been combined within Zoe, we get to ask the question, what is creating reality? Now they do try to fake us out with her being asleep and being carried off, but with her being awake, there no longer exists the entity that creates the machinations of the entire universe outside of Zoe, and Zoe is no longer dreaming. How and why does the universe still exist? Does adding the Undreaming and the Yagua and Lux to a subsection of a biologically engineered lifeform really nullify the very forces that create the entire universe? But if we have to assume that this is just a fake out and they're going to start the fourth game with her sleeping, way to rehash nearly everything in this shitty game.
Or at least, we die with our heads lifted to the sky. You'll do this for me. We share the respons-
Someone watch Game of Thrones. Now that you're up and about, meaning that tear-jerking moment with you dying on the ground is misleading garbage that it was, are you going to kill your mother now? This game just starts jumping around for no reason, and we're stuck here wondering if everyone involved in this garbage is going to die except for her and Westhouse. You know, the two most important people involved in this whole mess? Are we going to get any closure on this? Oh, you're saying I'm an idiot for even hoping for any amount of closure. Well, I can't blame you for that now, can I?
It's not like we can just get married.
Why? Because he's gay? You're not that much younger than him, and in every country on this planet, you are of consenting age. You don't need to have sex with him to be married to him. These are legal proceedings. You just need a surname, and you're way too old, and he's way too young for an adoption, so excuse me for telling you that you're retarded, and maybe you shouldn't believe everything you read, you retarded asshole.
That article made shockwaves. Sully sounded really happy.
Still have no clue why that article went through. Fuck that lazy sound effect, and fuck you, you rapist pile of shit. Who the fuck is that? Does that explain how Crow is with Saga even though he's dead? Why is he so small? Did you reincarnate him? Did you get a DNA sample and clone him? Either way, it's not the same bird and therefore not Crow. Or do you remember when Crow's soul went walking off into the distance with April? Fuck, this game is so fucking stupid.
Disappear. I'm getting scared and my heart starts
Are you drinking alcohol while pregnant, you dumb bitch? And why the fuck are you still with him? You broke up with him a long time ago because you didn't love him, you dumb bitch. Getting in a relationship with him again when you have amnesia and when you're an emotional wreck is okay, but you remember everything now. You remember him taking advantage of you. You remember falling out of love with him. You remember all the shitty fights you got into, and those were not caused by the brainwashing. And I said brainwashing, not mind control. So why did he magically get better rather than, I don't know, have to go to a psychologist and get unbrainwashed? Fuck. It was like all of my efforts just to get that asshole out of our lives, and the game just says, fuck you, Josh. How dare you not like this rapist being around what is basically your host for the video game? And guess what? You're right. I'm a fucking scumbag for not liking a weak, pathetic asshole who rapes women. Fuck this game.
Welcome, April Ryan.
Fuck you. And I just hope some stupid monkey tries to say I'm nitpicking. Outside of the fact that the word has a formal definition, meaning you can just look it up and see how stupid you sound when you quote it inappropriately, I'm not nitpicking. But I can't even count the amount of times that smaller and insignificant stuff bothered the hell out of me, like the thousands of lazy animations shown throughout this game, the many terrible writing moments that weren't plot related and therefore I didn't have time to cover them, and it goes on and on and on until I just throw my hands up and say, this is the worst sequel to one of the best IPs ever created. Up next is going to be Life is Strange because it's sure as hell better than this.
Tried to get out of here for years. No longer know what I'm doing. Well, I just disappear. I'm getting scared and my heart starts pounding. I try to scream but there's no sound. I am falling, I'm falling. When will my feet hit the ground? I am falling, I'm falling. But I'm not going down. Am I awake or am I dreaming? Am I try to run, but I'm not moving. Tried to get out of here for years. No longer know what I'm doing. Well, I just disappear. I'm getting scared and my heart starts pounding. I try to scream, but there's no sound. When will my feet hit the ground?